So I read a little more about this book, My Life by Bill Clinton. I think this is it the 15th or the 16th video? 15th, I think. And this time I read so much. It's 2 days of reading. It's so much content. I'll try not to make an hour. Okay, so let's get started. So the first thing that happened is that Bosnia, Croatia, and Serbia come to peace. So the Bosnia problem is finally having some progress. They come to peace agreement. Refugees can return home. Those who charged with war crimes will be excluded in political life. And NATO will supervise as agreement being implemented. And then there is 25 countries will be sending troops to help, including Americans, which Bill Clinton have to get it approved by the Congress. And then he went to sign a bill to approve a $5 billion for transportation project, including zero tolerance drinking standard for driving under 21. I guess like Americans really start driving at a young age. And then reinforce Ireland peace. That's a big one. There's a lot of speeches written here. I'll read a few. So there is an Ireland kid speech. It is only you can decide between division and unity, between hard lives and high hope. And then there's Clinton's speech. Are you going to be someone who define yourself in terms of what you are against or what you are for? And then there's a 14-year-old girl speech. Both sides have been hurt. Both sides must forgive. And then there's another Irish person's speech. Too long a sacrifice can make a stone of the heart. To remind them that everyone have to do their job. If one person sacrifice too much and do too much, he will start feeling bitter and start to develop a stone heart. So everybody should do their part to help, you know. And then he came back home to veto a Republican bill that still cut health and education and raised tax for the working poor. And then he went to Bosnia for peacemaking again. Then he come back and Republican has shut the government down again, but this time it's less severe because 500,000 federal employees are allowed to work without pay until government reopened. So these are some selfless people. They say even if you shut the government down, I will work without being paid. So that's like really selfless, right? Instead of being lazy at home because you're not getting paid anyway, but they decide to come to work. And then he vetoed more bill. This one for Department of Commerce, State, and Justice. Some of the reasons are like why he vetoed the bill is it eliminates COPS program in face of clear evidence that more police on the beat reduce crime. So some people were saying that more police cannot reduce crime. They won't face the fact that more police will reduce the crimes. And Clinton vetoed the bill because these people won't admit that more police will reduce the crime. He refused to not increase police. Um, so he that's one reason, and then more reason eliminates to Commerce Department's Advanced Technology Program, which many Republican business people supported because it helped them become more competitive. And then more reasons is severely cut funding for legal services for poor and for foreign operations. So these are some reasons. And then he vetoed another one stood out to me is the National Defense Authorization Act. And then I actually like the bill, part of the bill, because it improves the lives of militaries, and by increasing their salaries and help make their buildings and stuff more advanced, more comfortable to live, to operate. But what he disagree with is the complete deployment of a national missile defense system by 2003 before a workable system could be developed or would be needed. And also, how it violates our commitments under ABM Treaty and jeopardizes Russia's implementation of START 1. So Russia have agree to go through this program with US together. They both go through, like everybody go through it. It's got START. There's START 1, START 2, START 3. Basically what it does already starting to do is destroy nuclear missiles, remove 80% of nuclear weapon existed at the time, banning scariest type of nuclear weapon. So they're working on that, and so even though Clinton wants to improve the lives of military, he wants to keep his promise to Russia and to the world. So he vetoed the bill. And then the media continue to bury good things that he did, but this time a few media, even though very less, but they justifying for him, saying the president and the first lady have been publicly charged and secretly found innocent. So some people's for them now. And then he finally signed some CRs. I will repeat the CRs meaning up here because it is acceptable. Republicans keep on representing a welfare reform that's unfair and not reasonable. So Bill Clinton and his team, some of his team members start working on the welfare reform system themselves. And then they rally to the public and reach out to Republicans to attend it too, representing that the era of big government is over, but we cannot go back to left citizens to fend for themselves, meaning that they will fend for the citizens. And he acknowledged a Vietnam American veteran who saved 3 women when Oklahoma was bombed and worked without pay when the government shut down to help people. And Clinton felt that after this rally, the government won't shut down again. And then there's the Turkey and Greece in conflict, and Clinton briefly meet with their leaders. And then Hillary is in trouble again. Her record of working at law firm before is being investigated and questioned. The media called Hillary a congenital liar. I will list the word here. Hillary was before the grand jury for 4 hours of questioning. So she's the first lady that appeared before the grand jury for questioning, and and then like Clinton was like feeling like really bad about it. And then there's more Irish issue, and then Hamas bombed Israel, Cuban issue. Leaders of 29 countries come together on fighting terrorism and preserving peace. And then Arab nations decide to stood with Israel in condemning terror, and Israel then decide to open Gaza to let people in Gaza return to work in Israel. Like a lot of Gaza people was working at Israel back then, so they're thinking of reopening the airport. I guess they close it when there's terrorism, when Hamas bombed them. And then US provided Israel with financial support. And then there's the China and Taiwan issue, that China fired missile close to Taiwan to test firing. And Clinton's attitude is that they had never said whether they would or wouldn't come to defense of Taiwan if it were attacked. So he feel the Taiwan and China issue and the Middle East issue is kind of opposite. In the Middle East, if nothing is done, things will get worse. But for China and Taiwan, if China and Taiwan politicians don't do anything foolish, the problem will resolve itself over time. Because he found that in the 90s or even earlier, Taiwanese businessmen are investing heavily in China, and Chinese government really likes it. And so they have like financial interaction. So something to be fair, before the 2000, when Taiwanese celebrities earn big money in China, Taiwan's businessmen is investing heavily in China first. So they invested money in China first. So just to be fair, that Taiwan did contribute to China's finance. But even though financially they are like interacting, but politically they disagree. Like China disagree with Taiwanese government because after all they chased Taiwanese government, which is the previous Chinese government, to Taiwan. And of course Taiwanese government don't like Chinese government because they chased their government to Taiwan. So politically they don't agree, and he went back to work on aid, and then he signed Farm Bill. I'll go into some details about the Farm Bill. Greater flexibility for farmers in choosing what crop to plant without losing aid. And then money for economic development in rural communities. Funds to help farmers prevent soil erosion, air and water pollution, and the loss of wetlands. And then people are lying about him fraud, but he just didn't even know that these things exist. Then there's a quiet month for legislative front. He can do some presidential campaign for the upcoming re-election. He's about to enter the re-election to re-elect for president again. Then Clinton reflected on some of the ways people treat him. He says there's a big difference between being told that you're not good at your job and being told that you're just no good. So people are pretty harsh towards him. But if they say like you're doing a bad job because blah 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 blah, he feel at least he can improve it. But if people are like you're just no good, like that's not even constructive. He can't even like do anything about it. He feel that's just pure criticism. So he feel there's a big difference between these two type of comments. And then at the same time as the campaign, there's education and stop black church from being burnt by people. So back then, for a while, like black church always getting burnt by people. So he have to stop people from doing that. And then also, education should be improved as well because they're still working on it. And then there's the G7 again, and then there's the Republican convention again, and then for the presidential election. And then while campaigning, Iraq is having some issue again. So while solving all of these issues, they won. Like this time they don't have, because they're so busy with managing the country, they just don't have time to campaign that much, but they still campaigned. And then they won more electoral votes than 1992. That means like more people who worked with him have voted for him. And then won a bit less on public vote because they didn't campaign as much, but they still won. And now he is the first Democrat president to be elected to a second term since 1936. And then Clinton hope after re-election, he said, I was hoping that in the next 4 years, we would be freer to do the public's business without the turmoil and the strife of the first term. And then he reformed the team because some team member wants to go back home, and some team members don't agree with how he focused too much on deficit and invested too little in education, training, and new technologies. So like some people, like Republicans, they're like, oh, you should cut all the money for education technologies. But some of his team members think he invests too little on them. So like no matter what you do, there will be people that's unhappy, but you need to know who's right, who's saying the right things, what does people really need. And then he went to visit Australia and cuddled a koala. Yeah, so that's a cute part. The purpose is to save reefs everywhere, so there's a reason. So I will post the name here, reefs. And then he visited Thailand. And then there's inauguration. They highlighted 11.2 million new jobs and largest decline in crime rate in 25 years, 40% drop in student loan default rate. So a lot of good things happening here. And a veteran's named Vernon Baker, I'll link his name here, speech, he said, give respect before you expect it. Treat people the way you want to be treated. So yeah, I need to work on that myself too. And continue. Uh okay, Gingrich, this new, I think it's Newt Gingrich, this mean person who's like always against him and shut the government down. He is fined $300,000 for violation of health ethic rules. Some of the bad things he did is that he used tax exempt funds for political purpose and several untruthful responses to congressional investigators. And Clinton's attitude is choose to not exaggerate it and focus on people's business. So he continued to do what's right instead of like, oh, now you are being fined, I'm gonna attack you. So he didn't do that. And another accomplishment is that stood out to me is that the re-establish of the family as the primary unit of society. So he values family, and Clinton made his number one priority next to make every 8-year-old must be able to read, every 12-year-old must be able to log on to the internet, every 18-year-old must be able to go to college, and every adult in American must be able to keep on learning for a lifetime. And what they need to do about it is that they need to develop national standards and tests to measure progress of the student. And also 100,000 master teachers by national standard, and as well, and multi-billion-dollar budget to school constructions, connect every school and library to the internet by 2000, college aid. So that's some things happened with the education. And then there's the Geneva Agreements to open 90% of the telecommunication market to US. So Geneva is it's a big city in Switzerland, so like more international business trade opportunities for US. And then there's a difficulty in open Gaza airport for Palestinians who live in Gaza to go to Israel to go back to work, because people from Israel feel that they don't want to give up a lot in exchange for terrorism and for like feeling unsafe, because they need to fund the Gaza people, they need to fund the Palestinian for them to open up their airport. And what do they get in return? More terrorism, because they can freely walk around and Hamas people is within them, to feel more unsafe. So basically they don't want to pay money to become more unsafe, and that's totally reasonable. And Clinton feel they can try to maintain the momentum of baby steps towards peace, and is working with them side by side. So he feels that like it's not like big steps, it's like baby steps, little by little, to kind of like not be too progress that quickly. Maybe it's gonna be safer that way. And then Clinton broke his legs and he needs to be on wheelchair for a while. There's an operation that cuts his knee open, stuff like that. So scary. And then because he fall down the stairs and he broke his knees. Yeah. And then yeah, he have to sit on a wheelchair for a few days. I don't know if I just said it. Anyways, and then he worked with intelligence committee and complimented a person named George Tenet. I don't know if it's important, but I'll link it here. I don't know who George Tenet is. You can research up on it if you're curious. And then Russia worry about NATO expansion. Clinton said he would not let NATO attack Russia. But Yeltsin is very like worried. He explained Russia had been invaded twice, once by Napoleon and once by Hitler. So he feel Russia is just more sensitive towards being attacked. And then they continue with the start 1 and 2 and 3 like effort. They're still working on it. And the reason for the start project is that to disarm the world so humanity can sleep a little safer, so to make sure that the world has as less nuclear bomb as possible and use nuclear energy for a way to benefit the people's lives instead. And then Clinton finally agreed on a reasonable tax cut and his biggest increase in higher education, healthcare for 5 million kids. And then he worked on reducing illegal immigrants. Clinton also commented back then on trade with China, because there's a lot of opposition in the government, disapprove of China's human rights and trade policies. But Clinton said we need to stay involved with, not isolate China. So, and then he went on a NATO trip. While he was on NATO trip, he signed a partnership agreement with Ukraine in Bucharest and Copenhagen. He had received huge enthusiasm from the crowd and felt it reflected affirmation of their alliance in democracy. And then it's the Irish issue again. IRA restored to ceasefire. So that's an improvement. The Irish Republic Army finally wants peace now. And then he discovered there's environmental hazard, so he decided to have them cut greenhouse gas emission. For the rest of the chapter, he actually talked a lot about it. I won't go into details, but it's just like many different efforts to going to help cut the greenhouse gas emission and be good for the environment. And then he went to checking more progress in the progress he's made, which is manageable Medicare savings, middle class tax cuts were in, capital gains tax rate will be reduced from 28% to 20%. So he did more on it, and then his leg is getting better. Oh, his leg, that he broke his leg from rolling down from the stairs, and it's finally getting a little better. He doesn't have to be like in wheelchair anymore. And then he raised cigarette tax by 15 cents a pack to fund children's health insurance, and 12 billion fund in disability and health benefits for legal immigrants. Okay, and then he visited South America. And then the Chinese president came to Washington, President Jiang, and then Clinton told Jiang, in order for the US and China to have long-term partnership, our relationship have to have room for fair and honest disagreement. And then Jiang and Clinton had like some heated debate. And after the debate, Clinton reflected, we didn't resolve our differences, but our mutual understanding increased. So, like, Clinton is very like, I want you to understand me, and I want to understand you, and we see what we can do here. So that's his attitude. And then US agreed to put a 1.7 billion to provide financial support to the South Korea economy. So yeah, that's a lot of help to the Korean economy, because Korean economy is going like kind of sluggish, really sluggish, and he wants to help. So that's it for today's video. I guess I am able to reduce the video to half hour, but it's still like really long. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll continue to read this book.